Okay, so maintenance. I know. Not exactly the most thrilling topic at first glance, right?
Right.
But trust me on this one. We're not talking about, like, changing your oil or cleaning out your gutters. We're going way deeper.
Okay.
We're diving into a chapter from this book, Total Productive Maintenance. And let me tell you, it is anything but a dry textbook.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're talking about optimizing entire systems, figuring out when to fix something versus when to just overhaul the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
Ultimately, we're talking about making things work better and for longer.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, is something we all want, right?
Absolutely.
And I think we've all been there, right?
Good.
Where something breaks down at the absolute worst possible moment.
Oh, yeah.
But is waiting for things to break always a bad thing?
Yep.
Is that always the wrong approach?
Well, that's what I find so fascinating about this book. Because, usually we're all about being proactive, staying ahead of the curve. But this source actually makes a really compelling case for what they call breakdown maintenance.
Really?
Yeah, in certain situations, it's not the enemy we often make it out to be.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. When would you actually choose to just let something break down?
Well, think about it. Let's say you have a machine. It's a real workhorse, but it's not, like, essential to your core operations.
Okay.
And this source actually uses this really vivid description. Imagine this machine, it's caked in grime, raw materials are all gummed up in the works. It would take forever to clean and maintain this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly cleaning it, babying it, could actually end up costing you more than it's worth, right?
Wait, yeah.
So it becomes a cost-benefit analysis.
So in that case, sometimes it's just more practical to run it till it dies.
Exactly. Or picture this, a crucial piece of equipment, but it's nearing the end of its life anyway.
Yeah.
Breakdown maintenance then becomes kind of a last resort. It's a way to squeeze out those final bits of productivity from the machine before you invest in a brand new replacement.
So it's not just laziness or neglect. There's actually strategy involved in breakdown maintenance.
Exactly.
But, I think it's safe to say most of us would prefer if things didn't break down in the first place.
Of course, of course.
So that brings us to preventive maintenance, right?
Right. And the source really emphasizes this goes beyond just like basic upkeep. It's more of a three-pronged approach. Diligent, daily care, like checking for wear and tear. Then you've got your routine checkups, making sure everything's functioning the way it should be. And then finally, timely restoration.
So you're replacing parts before they actually cause a major headache.
Exactly.
Kind of like taking your car in for regular tune-ups.
Right.
You're investing a little upfront to avoid much bigger problems later on.
Exactly.
Although speaking of cars, the source mentioned this thing called over-maintenance. What's that about?
Yeah, that's a real thing, and it's an easy trap to fall into. Think of it like this. You wouldn't change your car's tires every 1,000 miles, would you?
Probably not, no.
Right, because you're just wasting resources, and you might even be introducing new points of failure.
Ah, that makes sense.
It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah, between being proactive and going overboard.
Exactly.
So how do you find that balance?
Well, it comes down to really understanding the nuances of each different approach. For instance, take periodic maintenance.
Okay.
The source illustrates this beautifully with a flowchart, actually, in Figure 5.4. Think of this as your scheduled maintenance, your oil changes, filter replacements, that kind of thing, all on a preset timetable.
So you're just sticking to a strict routine.
Exactly. But on the other hand, you have predictive maintenance, and that one's all about data. Sensors, sophisticated monitoring systems, they all come into play here, and the goal is to detect problems before they even become problems.
So instead of just blindly following a schedule, you're using real-time information to make decisions.
Precisely. And the source has this great example. They use Table 5.1 to show how tracking things like temperatures, vibrations, even sound patterns can give you early warning signs of potential failures.
So it's like you're not just maintaining a piece of equipment, you're gaining this deeper understanding of its health and performance.
Exactly. And the best part is, this data-driven approach, it can be used across so many industries. You could have a manufacturing plant using this to avoid costly production shutdowns, or even a hospital using it to monitor critical equipment.
Right. Yeah.
It's about getting ahead of the game, being proactive.
Yeah.
Instead of just reacting when things go wrong.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about being proactive, but what happens when things, actually do go wrong, even when we're trying our best to prevent it? Does that mean we've, failed at maintenance?
Yeah. Not necessarily, no. That's where corrective maintenance comes in. It's all about addressing those unexpected failures, those curveballs that let's face it, happen to the best of us.
So it's not just about putting out fires then.
Definitely not. It's about turning those failures into opportunities,
Yeah.
opportunities to learn and to actually improve your systems. And actually, the source draws a really clear distinction between two different types of corrective maintenance: immediate action and planned deferment.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, you have a critical pump in a chemical plant, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it just suddenly fails.
Oh, that's bad.
Right. You need to act fast, obviously. You need to minimize downtime, avoid any potential hazards.
Right. So that would be immediate action.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, let's say you have a minor issue. Let's say a small oil leak or something.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not ideal, obviously, but it's not an immediate threat to production either, right?
Right.
That's when you might use planned deferment. You schedule the repair for a time that makes the most sense.
So you're not disrupting everything.
Right. You could even try to coordinate it with other planned maintenance activities.
So even in the face of failure, there's room for strategy.
Absolutely.
This reminds me, the source also mentioned something called DMADV in this context. What is that?
Ah, yes. DMADV. It stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Design, Verify.
Matchy.
Right. It's a problem-solving framework that basically takes corrective maintenance from a reactive fix to this proactive opportunity.
So it's about optimization then.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just fixing the problem at hand. So you remember that chemical plant pump we talked about?
The one that failed, yeah.
Okay, so let's say that pump failed prematurely, right?
Right.
Instead of just swapping it out for a new one and hoping for the best, you would use DMADV to dig deeper.
Okay.
First, you define the problem. So in this case, was it a faulty seal? Was it installed incorrectly? Whatever it might be. And then you measure. How often has this happened before? What's the cost of these failures?
So you're gathering data, basically, trying to figure out the root cause of the issue.
Precisely. And that brings us to the analyze phase, where you actually examine all that data you collected to understand what's really going on.
Yeah.
You might use statistical analysis, process mapping, even bring in some experts to get their perspective.
So we're getting pretty high level here.
We are, but it's worth it, because once you truly understand the problem, you can design an effective solution. Maybe that means tweaking the equipment, maybe it means improving your operating procedures, or even choosing a more robust design for that part from now on.
So you're not just fixing the symptom, you're preventing that same problem from happening again in the future.
Exactly. And then the last step, you verify that the solution actually works. Run some tests, monitor performance over time, and fine-tune as needed. It's all about continuous improvement.
I really like this DMADV framework because it shows how maintenance isn't just about, keeping things running. It's about always looking for ways to improve.
I totally agree. And, that actually leads us to what the source calls the quote-unquote holy grail of maintenance. Maintenance prevention.
Maintenance prevention.
Yeah. It's this idea that you can actually design systems that are so robust, so inherently reliable, that they basically require very minimal maintenance over their entire lifespan.
Wow. Okay, but is that even possible? Can you really design something that never breaks?
Well, nothing lasts forever, right? But this source makes a really compelling case that by really focusing on the 4 key stages of maintenance prevention, so that's design, fabrication, installation, and testing, and then finally commissioning, you can significantly reduce those failures.
So you're minimizing the need for all that reactive maintenance.
Exactly. And it all starts in that initial design phase, making sure you're building things right from the get-go.
So what sets maintenance prevention apart from, just good design?
That's a great question. It's about thinking bigger than just the physical parts. This source really emphasizes the importance of those early management systems.
So what? Give me an example.
Well, for example, establishing clear communication channels from the get-go,
Okay.
developing really thorough training programs for everyone involved, and of course, implementing strict quality control measures throughout the entire process, from design to implementation.
So it's not enough to just have a good design on paper. You need to make sure everyone's on the same page and everything's built to those standards.
Absolutely. It's like laying a strong foundation so that the whole structure can stand the test of time.
This is making me realize that maintenance isn't just about wrenches and screwdrivers. It's about a mindset.
It really is.
It's about taking that long-term view, thinking ahead, being proactive. But, with all these different types of maintenance we've talked about, how do you even know which approach is the right one for your situation?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
Yeah. We've got all these tools in our maintenance toolbox, but knowing which one to use and when,
Right.
It can get a little overwhelming.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all answer here, but the source does offer some helpful guidance, I think.
Okay, good.
Remember how we were talking about data being so crucial for predictive maintenance?
Yeah.
Well, that data-driven thinking, it's key for choosing the right maintenance strategy overall, too.
So even deciding how to approach maintenance, we need data for that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's all about understanding your specific situation. What are your operational goals, first of all?
Right.
And then what are the costs associated with any downtime or failures? How much risk are you willing to tolerate?
Okay.
By answering these questions, you can start to figure out which factors matter most when picking that maintenance strategy.
So for example, if a business is really all about minimizing risk, maybe they're in a highly regulated industry like pharmaceuticals or something.
Right.
They might be more likely to go with a really rigorous, proactive approach,
Exactly. They might invest heavily in preventive maintenance or even go all in on maintenance prevention right from the start.
trying to avoid any disruptions whatsoever.
Exactly. But then you think about a startup,
Right.
limited resources. They might decide a more reactive approach makes more sense. Quick fixes, learning as they go.
It's about finding that balance then, balancing the risk, the costs, and how efficiently you can operate.
Exactly. And that's where those KPIs we talked about come in. They help you track whether your approach is really getting you the results you want.
Like a measuring stick for your maintenance plan.
Exactly. The source even gives this example of tracking how often breakdowns occur. So let's say you've implemented a new preventive maintenance schedule. Is it working?
Right. Are you seeing fewer breakdowns?
Exactly. Or you could track what's called the mean time to repair. Basically, how long does it take to get things back up and running when something does break down?
So it's about constantly monitoring, making sure things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah,
But, it's one thing to collect all this data, but you have to actually use it, right?
100%. I always say data without action is just, dot data.
Yeah.
It's not enough just to have it. You have to be willing to actually use it to adapt to get better.
So, like, imagine you're tracking the cost of spare parts, for example,
Yeah.
and you notice there's this sudden spike in what you're spending.
Okay, yeah.
Red flag, right?
Huge.
Time to investigate. Maybe there's a problem with how you're getting those parts, or maybe you need to find a different supplier altogether.
You got it.
It's like this constant feedback loop. You're always refining, always getting better based on what the data is telling you.
I love that. And that brings up a really important point. Effective maintenance, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
That's a great way to put it. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into maintenance. What's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
Maintenance, it's not about fixing things when they break. It's about managing what you have proactively to achieve real excellence in how you operate.
I like that.
It's about understanding the nuances of all these different approaches, using data to make smart decisions, and constantly looking for ways to get better.
Moving from a reactive mindset to a proactive one.
Yes.
We're not just fixing what's broken, we're optimizing for the long haul. And a big thank you to this book, Total Productive Maintenance, for giving us so much to think about today.
It's a good one.
It is. We've gone from breakdown maintenance to this idea of maintenance prevention.
The Holy Grail.
Exactly. We hope this deep dive has given everyone listening a new perspective on maintenance,
Yeah.
because it really is crucial to, well, pretty much everything.
It really is.
Until next time, happy maintaining, everybody.